At 2:14 a.m., my phone reported me missing. The first alert came at 2:14 a.m., loud enough to jolt me upright in bed. It was that unmistakable emergency broadcast sound, the one that cuts through sleep like a blade. My heart was already racing before I even looked at the screen. I assumed it was a weather warning or an Amber Alert. Instead, the notification preview made my stomach drop. It read, "Emergency alert, missing person, Daniel Harper." That's my name. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, convinced I was still dreaming. My room was dark and silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I unlocked my phone with shaking fingers and opened the alert. It displayed my full name, my age, and even the street I lived on. I was very much inside my apartment building. I checked the date and time twice to make sure there wasn't some glitch. Everything looked normal. The alert appeared official, formatted exactly like any other government emergency broadcast. It even included a small photo thumbnail. When I tapped it, my own face stared back at me. The photo wasn't from social media. I knew that immediately. It looked like a still frame from security footage. I was walking down the sidewalk outside my building, wearing the same clothes I had on earlier that evening. The timestamp on the image read 1:47 a.m. I checked the clock again. Las 12:16 am. I hadn't left my apartment since 10 p.m. At first, I convinced myself it had to be a technical error. Maybe someone with the same name had gone missing nearby. Maybe some corrupted database had pulled the wrong photo. It had to be something explainable. Governments don't send false emergency alerts about random people. At least, that's what I told myself. I got out of bed and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside, just enough to look down at the street. Everything was quiet. A few parked cars. No flashing lights. No police vehicles. No search teams scanning the sidewalks. The world looked completely normal. My phone buzzed again. Another alert. This time, the tone was shorter, but sharper, like an update. The screen read, "Update. Subject last seen, heading north on Madison Street. Do not approach if located." My apartment building sits directly on Madison Street. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I hadn't gone north. It was empty, lit only by the dim yellow emergency lights near the ceiling. The carpet muffled my steps as I walked toward the elevator. Every shadow felt heavier than usual. I half expected someone to step out and grab me. The elevator mirror reflected a pale version of myself I barely recognized. My eyes looked wide and unfocused. For a brief second, I wondered if I was sleepwalking. Maybe I had gone outside without remembering. Maybe I had some kind of blackout episode. When I reached the lobby, it was empty. No officers, no concerned neighbors, just silence. The air was cool, the streets still deserted. If I was officially missing, no one seemed particularly worried about it. Then my phone vibrated again. This time the alert made my knees weaken. Suspect identified, in connection with disappearance. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling. The message stated that the missing person case involving Daniel Harper had now been reclassified. Approximately 6 feet tall, brown hair. Last seen wearing a dark gray hoodie. That's exactly what I was wearing. The attached image loaded a second later. It was me again. But this time, I wasn't walking. I was running. The photo showed me glancing over my shoulder, my face tense and panicked. The timestamp read 2:03 a.m. That was 11 minutes before the first alert. I checked the hallway camera app connected to my apartment building's security system. The recording from 1:30 a.m. onward showed nothing. The hallway remained empty the entire time. I never left. Yet the photo clearly showed me outside. My phone buzzed again. Caution. Subject considered dangerous. Do not engage. My chest tightened painfully. I stared at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. For a moment, I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. The description matched me perfectly. The photos were undeniably me. But the events described hadn't happened, unless they were about to. That thought froze me in place. I suddenly remembered something subtle but disturbing. The first alert had claimed I was reported missing at 1:52 a.m. The second update placed me heading north at 2:03 a.m. The timeline was moving forward, and each alert was arriving minutes after the time mentioned, as if I were receiving delayed notifications from a version of events that had already occurred. If the alerts were following a timeline, then the next one hadn't arrived yet. That meant something else was scheduled to happen. I rushed back upstairs and locked my apartment door. Every small sound felt amplified now. The refrigerator humming, pipes shifting inside the walls, my own breathing. At 2:29 a.m., the phone screamed again. I almost dropped it. Body discovered near Madison Street. My vision blurred for a second before I forced myself to open the alert. The message said a body had been found 2 blocks north of my apartment. The deceased was identified as Daniel Harper. Identified not as me. There was a photo attached. It showed a blurred image of someone lying face down near a dumpster. Police lights reflected faintly off nearby buildings, 8 minutes earlier. I checked the clock. 2:29 a.m. I was still alive. The room felt unreal, like a set built to imitate reality, but missing something fundamental. My fingers felt numb as I zoomed into the photos. The body's face was partially visible. Even through the blur, I could see it was mine. Same scar on the eyebrow, same jawline, same everything. I stumbled backward and collapsed into a chair. If the timeline was consistent, then the image I was looking at represented something that had already happened somewhere. Not here, not yet. My phone vibrated again, but this time it wasn't the emergency tone. It was a regular notification from an unknown number, a text message. I opened it slowly. It contained only 3 words: "You're still alive." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering in my ears. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. There was no profile picture. Just those 3 words sitting in a blank conversation. Another message followed almost instantly. Not for long. I looked toward the window again, and that's when I saw him. Across the street, Dot standing under a flickering streetlight, watching my building. He looked exactly like me. For a moment, I genuinely thought exhaustion was making me hallucinate. The figure across the street stood perfectly still beneath the flickering light, hands at his sides, head tilted slightly upward, toward my window. The distance was far enough that I couldn't see every detail, but I didn't need to. I knew that posture. I knew the way he held his shoulders. It was the way I stood when I was anxious and trying not to show it. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the unknown number. "You're ahead of schedule." My throat tightened as I stared at the words. Ahead of what schedule? The emergency alerts had shown a timeline where I had already run north on Madison Street. According to that version of events, I was already dead. Yet here I was, still standing in my apartment, staring at someone who looked exactly like me. The figure across the street slowly raised his phone. A second later, mine buzzed again. "You weren't supposed to see this yet." The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer. My pulse pounded in my temples as I looked back down at the street. He hadn't moved closer, hadn't made any threatening gestures. He was just watching, the same way I was watching him. It felt less like being hunted and more like being studied. Another emergency tone shattered the silence. This one was louder than the previous ones. "Emergency broadcast. Suspect confirmed at large. Approach with caution." A new photo loaded beneath the text. It showed me standing at my apartment window, taken from across the street, taken seconds ago. They weren't delayed notifications. They were updating in real time, adjusting as events shifted, or correcting something. I rushed back to the window and pulled the curtain shut completely. My breathing felt uneven, sharp, and shallow. If he could take photos of me, that meant he wasn't just some glitch in reality. He was physically there. He could move. He could act. My phone buzzed again. "You're deviating?" I swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" I typed back. The response came instantly. "You weren't supposed to stay inside." A cold realization washed over me. In the version of events shown in the alerts, I had left the building and run north. That was how the timeline progressed, toward my death. But I hadn't done that. I had stayed inside, which meant something was off. Another message appeared. "The correction is coming. Police en route. Subject believed to be inside residence." My stomach dropped. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't reported anything. Yet according to the alert, authorities were already on their way to my apartment. I ran to the peephole and looked down the hallway. It was still empty. For now, my phone vibrated again. "If they find you alive, the timeline collapses." My fingers hovered over the screen. "What timeline?" I typed. "The one where I survived." My mind struggled to process that sentence. I looked back toward the window, imagining him still standing there. If he was me, and I was me, then what separated us? Another alert interrupted my thoughts. Update. Subject. Resisting arrest. And in the center of it, me. 2 officers holding my arms as I tried to break free. The timestamp read 2:41 a.m. I checked the clock. 2:37 a.m. 4 minutes ahead. 4 minutes before something that hadn't happened yet. Footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway outside my apartment. Slow, measured, not hurried. My heart pounded violently as someone knocked on my door. "Police!" a voice called out. "This is a welfare check." I stared at the door, unable to move. The alerts weren't predicting the future. They were guiding it. Every message seemed designed to push events closer to what had already occurred in another version of reality. The knocking grew firmer. "Sir, we need you to open the door." My phone buzzed again. "This is where you ran." I backed away from the entrance. If I opened the door, I would be stepping into the exact scenario shown in the photo. The struggle, the arrest, the escalation. But if I didn't open it, something else might happen. Another message arrived. "Choose carefully. Only one of us gets to exist." The hallway fell silent for a moment. Then I heard the metallic click of something against the lock. They were preparing to force entry. Panic surged through me, but beneath it was something else: anger. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was a replacement. Somehow, in some version of events, I had died tonight. But something had shifted. I had seen the alert too early. I had stayed inside instead of running. And now, the system, whatever it was trying to correct that mistake. The door burst open. 2 officers rushed in, weapons drawn, but not fired. Their faces were tense, uncertain. "Daniel Harper," one of them demanded. I raised my hand slowly. "I'm right here," I said. They hesitated. For a second, confusion crossed their faces. My phone screamed again. "Error detected." The officers glanced at each other. One of them spoke into his radio, but I couldn't make out the words. They weren't aggressive anymore. They looked unsure, like they had walked into the wrong apartment. Another alert. Identity conflict. The air in the room felt heavy and distorted, like static filling the space. The lights flickered once. I looked toward the open doorway, and he was standing behind them. Not across the street, not outside. Inside the hallway. He looked calm, patient. The officers didn't react to him at all. It was like they couldn't see him. My phone buzzed again. "Only one version stabilizes." The officers slowly lowered their weapons. "Sir," one of them said carefully, "we received a report that you were in danger." "In danger from who?" I asked. They looked at each other again. "That's the strange part," the other officer replied. The caller said. "From yourself." The figure in the hallway smiled faintly. For the first time, I noticed something different about him. His eyes weren't exactly the same as mine. They looked steadier, colder, like someone who had already accepted something irreversible. My phone vibrated once more. The correction window is closing. The lights flickered again, harder this time. The officer stepped back as if dizzy, and the version of me in the hallway took a step forward. The version of me in the hallway stepped into the apartment as if he belonged there. The officers didn't react to him at all, didn't even glance in his direction. My phone vibrated violently in my hand, but I couldn't look away from him. He studied me with an expression that wasn't hostile, but wasn't friendly either. "Time's almost up," he said calmly. The officers looked confused. "Sir, who are you talking to?" one of them asked. Their voices sounded distant, muffled, like they were underwater. I pointed toward the hallway, but they saw nothing. The other version of me tilted his head slightly, almost amused. "They can't perceive the conflict," he said. "Only the anomaly." My phone screamed again. "Stabilization required." The screen flickered between images rapidly. In one frame, I was handcuffed on the lobby floor. In another, I was lying motionless near the dumpster from the earlier alert. Then the image changed again, showing me standing exactly where I was now, staring at myself. It was like reality was buffering. "You weren't supposed to read the first alert," he continued. "You weren't meant to become aware before the event completed." His tone was steady, almost clinical. Awareness created overlap. The officers took a cautious step backward as the lights flickered violently. "Sir, we're going to need you to calm down," one of them said. They didn't understand what was happening, but they could feel it. The apartment felt unstable, like the walls themselves were struggling to stay solid. "Which one of us dies?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. I demanded. He stepped closer, and I noticed something disturbing. There was a faint scar on his forehead that I didn't have. "The one who ran," he said quietly. Images from the alerts flooded back into my mind. Me running north on Madison Street. Me struggling in the lobby. Me lying behind the dumpster. In his version of events, he had survived something. In mine, I had interrupted it. "You're not supposed to exist," he added. My phone vibrated again. "Reality conflict AT, 87%. The lights burst, plunging half the apartment into darkness. "If I disappear," I asked, "do you live?" He looked at me with something close to pity. "Yes." The simplicity of that answer felt heavier than anything else that had happened tonight. In his timeline, he had continued. "In mine, I had become aware too soon. 2 versions occupying the same moment couldn't both persist. One had to collapse." "You could let it finish," he said softly. "Just step forward." I felt the pressure building in my chest again, like gravity had doubled. The alerts had been pushing toward one inevitable image. The body near the dumpster. The timeline wanted correction. "Why did you text me?" I asked suddenly. He paused. "Because I didn't know which of us would remember." My breathing grew uneven as understanding settled in. He had been as confused as I was. The first alert hadn't just informed me. It had informed him too. Somewhere in the fracture between timelines, awareness had split. The phone vibrated again. "Reality conflict, AT, 94%. The apartment walls shimmered slightly, like heat rising off asphalt. The officers were barely standing now, disoriented and terrified. "What's happening?" one of them whispered. He thinks he survived, I said quietly, keeping my eyes on the other version of me. I did survive, he replied firmly. In your version, silence stretched between us. The pressure in my chest intensified, painful and sharp. My vision blurred at the edges. If I waited any longer, the collapse might choose randomly. It might not be my decision anymore. You said only one stabilizes, I said. Yes, then let it be the one who understands. His expression shifted slightly. What does that mean? He asked. If you survive without knowing why this happened, it will happen again, I said. Another fracture, another correction, another version of us trying to overwrite the last. My voice felt steadier than I expected. At least I know now. The phone buzzed violently. Reality, conflict, AT, 99%. The room trembled. The officers fell to their knees. The lights went completely dark, except for the faint glow from the screen. The other version of me stared at me, realization slowly dawning in his eyes. You're not choosing survival, he said. No, I replied. I stepped directly into him. The sensation wasn't physical impact. It was like walking through freezing water and burning electricity at the same time. My vision shattered into fragments of different outcomes. Running, falling, surviving, dying. Every version overlapping in rapid flashes. Then silence, complete and absolute. I opened my eyes. I was lying on cold pavement. Police lights flashed faintly in the distance. The dumpster loomed above me, just like in the photo. My hoodie was torn at the shoulder. My head throbbed with pain, but I was breathing. I forced myself upright slowly, every muscle aching. My phone lay on the ground beside me. The screen was cracked, but still on. One final alert glowed faintly, stabilization complete. I looked at the timestamp, 2:21 a.m., the same time shown in the photo of my body. But there was no body, just me. Footsteps approached from down the alley. I heard officers calling out to each other. I glanced down at my phone one last time. A final message from the unknown number appeared. You survived. I hesitated. Then another message came. This time, the police turned the corner and spotted me sitting up against the wall. Shock crossed their faces. Sir, are you hurt? One of them shouted. I looked down at my reflection in the cracked screen. For a split second, I thought I saw two sets of eyes staring back. Then the screen went black.